great to be here. So I'm going to talk about stateful applications, but not in a way how we normally think about stateful applications, but more in the context of how we can shift left stuff, right? How can we enable people on the left side of the life cycle of an application to do things themselves instead of waiting for somebody else to do it for them, right? Now, quick introduction, I'm Viktor. I work for Upbound. I have a Twitter account. I belong to some groups. I have books and Paradox and podcasts and stuff like that. Doesn't matter. Now, what does matter is anybody from Atlassian here? No? Okay, I want to destroy JIRA as a product completely. That's my mission. I don't want really to be in a place where everything is done through JIRA tickets, meaning, hey, I need a cluster. I open a JIRA ticket. It goes to Joe. Joe has no idea what's going on. He sends it to Peter. Peter has a queue of things then he needs to do, comes back 3 months later, but he doesn't close the JIRA ticket. He comes back and says, what do you really need? I need additional information, and so on and so forth, right? Same thing for databases, same thing for applications in Kubernetes or for anything, right? What I want to do is to figure out a way how we can enable developers to self-serve themselves. Very easy. I mean, the message, not necessarily how to do it. So, the solution really, we tried different ways in the industry in the past, right? I don't know if any of you used Heroku before, right? The Heroku, absolutely amazing platform. Only few. The rest of you are very probably in your early 20s. Cool. So we had opinionated platforms. They did not really work for all types of users and customers. Usually when you're bigger, you have some special things in your company. Nobody understands why you have something special, but you all do, right? So what we're trying to do is enable some people in a company to convert their expertise into tailor-made services that everybody else can consume. And we need those services to be discoverable, to be auto-documented, and so on and so forth, right? Now, what I'm going to do, I don't like talking much with slides, so I will do a live demo. And I will try to figure out, I figured it out in advance, otherwise it would be a silly demo. But I'll try to figure out, I'll pretend that I'll try to figure out how I can deploy a stateful application to a Kubernetes cluster with a database server, with a database inside of that server, with a table inside of that database, and be able to develop my application while everything is being synchronized without me knowing anything, or just a little bit, about AWS or Google Cloud, about VPC and subnets and internet gateways and all the things that nobody knows, except the guy that sits in a basement of your company and you never talk to, without JIRA tickets. So that's going to be my goal. So requirements of Kubernetes cluster, in this case, hypothetical. The principles apply to everything else, right? And the tools can be different. So I'm not promoting any tools or anything. So I want to have a Kubernetes cluster myself, without knowing what's happening in AWS or wherever else, a database server, a database with a schema. No, I already said all that. Okay, let's go to the next one. I will use Crossplane to manage my resources using Kubernetes. I will use Schema Hero because it's awesome, except when it doesn't work, but then you need something else. And Octeto and a lot of bash scripts, right? So I'm going to skip the setup part because I already did that in my hotel room last night after a lot of drinks with people who I'm not going to name. Anyways, so, right, I'm a developer right now. I do not know much about, I did not spend 17 years with Kubernetes. I did not start using it 10 years before it appeared. That type of expert, right? So, here's an example. Somebody in my company who knows how to create Kubernetes clusters created a custom resource definition. I'm using Crossplane, so in Crossplane we call it compositions. That says, you can define something like this, right? We already spoke with everybody in our company, and we agreed that people are interested really to specify the size of the nodes and the minimum number of nodes of a cluster, and that they want to be able to choose between Google or Azure or wherever you are running, right? But very, very easy interface. Now, what is going to happen behind the scenes is going to be complicated. But again, I'm a developer. I don't care about those things. I just want the cluster. This is how much I don't care. I don't even know what are the sizes in Google. So I said medium. Right? So, how do I do that? kubectl. Now, in a real world situation, don't do this, please. In a real world scenario, you would be storing it in Git. Those of you on SVN, quit your jobs. So you should store it in Git and push that manifest to Git that I showed you before, but I was too lazy to set up Argo CD or Flux. And I assume that you already know it, so I'm going to go without it and go directly with kubectl. What was it? Example, skates, GCP, GK, this one, right? I'm going to apply to the cluster. Now I'm faking it here a bit. I already executed this command before, last night after drinks. You'll see whether it works. The reason why I'm not doing it live now, that I'm faking it, is because it takes like 10 minutes to create a cluster in Google Cloud, so I didn't want you to wait for that. What does matter is that you might be asking, okay, so how did you know that you should write something like this, right? And in Kubernetes, it's very easy because Kubernetes has an extensible API. You extend the API, you can ask Kubernetes about anything, right? You can ask, not about, it's not ChatGPT, not anything. But you can just do kubectl explain, and then the name of the resource cluster, claim, DevOps, toolkit, series.com, recurse, I think. Recursive.
You have an A after the X and explain.
Ah, you see? When I don't copy and paste, I make mistakes. And don't tell me that you don't. Anyways, you get the schema, right? What does matter here is that I can say kubectl namespace 18. I want to get cluster claims, and I see the status of my cluster. Again, this is custom made for me as a developer by somebody who knows this stuff. And he thought that all I should know is whether a Crossplane is available, it is, whether node pool is available, whether it is ready, it's done. Whatever is happening in the background does not matter, right? Now, what matters here is that I should connect to that cluster somehow, and I can do that to listing the secrets, right? Here is the secret, contains authentication to my cluster. I do not need to know how it was created, somebody does. So I already exported that secret into a file. So I'm skipping that. That's part of the doing stuff while you're after drinks. And you can see my new cluster here up and running, right? Maybe. There we go. Now, that part was kind of relatively easy, straightforward. So let me switch to a database server. Now, you know, to create database servers, you need, in AWS, you need to create RDS instance, you need to create subnets and VPCs. Good stuff, which I don't know about. So what I'm going to do is use compositions again. Somebody was very kind, the DBA in my company, figured out how to create databases and created yet another service. In this case, it's called SQL Claim. I can use labels to select where the database will be running. And I can specify some parameters like Postgres version 13 small. I still don't know what are the sizes in Google. And I want to run it in GCP, in a dev namespace. So namespace, space dev, I want to apply whatever is defined in examples SQL GCP official, right? Again, I think that I faked this one as well. I think I created it last night. Same command. Maybe I didn't. We'll find out. Yeah, I did. Anyways, I can say, give me all the dev get SQL claims, and I know that there is a database running. It's ready, right? I do not know anything else about it, but it's running probably somewhere in Google, right? Now, so I solved the problem that I have place where to run my application, Kubernetes cluster. It could be anything else, right? I solved a problem how to create a database server. The next thing I need to figure out is how to create a schema. And I want to continue that, for that something to be easy, right? Now, as you already saw, Crossplane, I'm not going to speak about Crossplane anymore, I promise, this is the last one. Create secrets with authentication to stuff, and in this case, it created a secret called MyDB, because that's the name of my database server, where I have authentication and know how to connect to that database and so on and so forth. It also created get databases, PostgreSQL, SQL, Crossplane.io. It created a database inside of that server. Now, some of you don't know what's the difference between database and database server. If you don't, it's a good thing for you. Anyways, what I do need, what you almost certainly know, is that I need a schema, right? And that schema, I'm going to use Schema Hero. I promise that it won't be Crossplane anymore. This is yet another extension of Kubernetes. Kubernetes is all about extending. Whomever of you is using vanilla Kubernetes, you're in a lot of pain, right? You still did not figure it out. Kubernetes is not supposed to be used as is. It's supposed to be extended with the tools and the processes, whatever else you need. And in this case, I'm using Schema Hero. I think it comes from Grafana Labs, or maybe not. I don't know. Anyways, I'm telling Schema Hero, hey, there is a database somewhere. That database you should be able to connect to that database through a secret called MyDB, and the key is password. Connect to that database and do your stuff. And the stuff that you want to do is this. Now, this is declarative, right? So I don't know what is the state of my database. Maybe it has this table, maybe it doesn't matter. I'm declaratively defining this is what I want to have in my database. This table called videos with some columns. Again, it's a silly demo. Go and figure it out. Not my problem, right? So how do you do that? Again, you push it to Git. I didn't set up Argo CD. So I'm going to do that manually and say namespace is dev. I want to apply whatever is defined in examples, SQL, Schema Hero, Postgres, PostgreSQL, Google, this one, right? It looks like I'm so good that I memorized everything. I'm not. I'm reading from a tablet. just to make it clear, right? And then I can say, hey, namespace is dev. I want to retrieve all tables. And there you go, right? I told Kubernetes that I want a table somewhere, and Kubernetes is acting in this context as a control plane. So you need to stop thinking about Kubernetes as a thingy exclusively designed to run your thingies as containers inside of some servers, right? That's just the beachhead. That's how it all started. But it's supposed to be a control plane from which you manage stuff. And that stuff can be your applications running as containers. That stuff can be your applications running in VMs managed by Kubernetes. That can be Lambdas, that can be Google Cloud Runs, that can be databases, can be anything, right? That's what Kubernetes is designed to facilitate. Not to do. You need to extend Kubernetes, but to facilitate. Now, the last thing I need so far is a developer anywhere. If you find me a developer who couldn't do what I did so far, except kubectl, you would be pushing that to Git. If you find me a developer who cannot write 5 lines of YAML, fire that person. I was about to ask, and if you find it complicated, but now you already know that if you raise your hand, you will be fired, so don't do that. I have my application. Now I'm ready to develop my application. I have a cluster, I have a database server, I have database inside of that server, I have table, I have everything I need. And this is my application. It's called Silly Demo. And I defined something called Octeto. I don't know if any of you heard about Octeto. Cool. Almost 4 of you. Excellent. So Octeto is a way how to manage development lifecycle of your applications that will be running in production, and you're clever enough not to use Docker Compose, right? Apart from being on a mission of destroying Atlassian, I'm moving towards destroying Docker. but not in this session. Anyways, what I'm telling my Kubernetes cluster running somewhere is, hey, I want to deploy something defined in this directory, customized overlay stateful. That's how it's running in production. You can run it in my development environment. I don't know what it is, but just run it. And I want my source code to be synchronized into the container that will be created in my cluster, right? As a replacement for the real application. Now, typically you're used to, especially if you use Docker to mount volumes, don't do that, it's horrible. What this will do is synchronize whatever I type on my laptop with the Kubernetes cluster running wherever. Local, branch desktop, minikube, remote, in this case, Jiki, it does not really matter. What does matter is that I'm going to change the context, change to my newly created cluster. I don't know which one it is. Let's say it's this one. And I'm going to say octeto up in the namespace dev. And if it fails, it's not that cluster. Too late. And this will take a bit of time because first time it needs to compile and what's not. We have 30 minutes. So I'm going to do something that nobody else did. I'm going to say, do you have any questions? And then I'm going to finish the presentation later. Any questions? Octeto is a tool that, think of it as, it's a tool that allows you to perform development of your application using manifests that you would use normally in production for your application, assuming it's running in Kubernetes, and ship it somewhere to some development Kubernetes cluster and synchronize your code all the time. So what that means is that I would be typing code of my application, and every time I save the file, it would automatically be synchronized with my cluster, and I would always have the latest and greatest. Hopefully, that would run tests as well. But I know how complicated tests are for you guys, so maybe not. Anyways, kidding. Any other question while waiting? No? I thought when I arrived in Israel in the airport, everybody is so loud. Everybody screams at everybody, and now nothing. Yeah? I don't know how to sing or dance, so it's either you ask questions or we watch each other in silence.
Behind you.
Okay, imagine that it worked. Kubectl get version output YAML. I'll find it out. No? Why it doesn't work? No, it's not get version. There is no get version. Why don't you correct me? It's KCD. You all know Kubernetes, right? Do I find out the information about the cluster here? Probably not. Kubectl?
Cluster minus info.
Ah, there's the guy who pays attention.
Cluster minus info, 1 minus no spaces.
Well, so. Okay. Context.
It's the bottom context.
4244. You've been even paying attention. Is it this one?
Yeah, look at the date.
I don't care. Why am I on a stage and you're not is a mystery. Anyway, it will build it, it will run my application, and instead of me showing you and waiting another couple of minutes, you just need to trust me. Oh, it's happening, something. It will synchronize my code from my laptop there, and I will always have the latest and greatest, and it will be running, and it will be accessible to the local host. And I was supposed to show you, no, not that one. I was supposed to show you later, look, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be awesome. I was supposed to show you this, right? I would send a request to my application, the local host, it would connect to the database, put it to the database, everything would be working amazingly well, and we would live happily ever after. So trust me, it will work eventually. Yeah, pulling image Golang. There we go. Maybe it will work. Maybe it doesn't. Anyways, we have 10 more minutes. I like to finish early so that I have time for questions. You can ask me anything except the bank account. There we go. Use Upbound. No, give money to Upbound. I have a personal account. Use Crossplane, listen to the podcast, go to watch the videos, and that's all I have for you today while waiting for this to happen. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So I'm inside of my Kubernetes cluster right now, right? If I list the files, those are the files from my laptop, not from the application itself. Because if you ever build your container images that contain the source code, you should be fired as well. That's how you know it's not there, right? I can run my application, and that will take another couple of minutes. And that's it. I have a cluster, I have a database server, schema, whatever, and it was very easy.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, so Viktor, you review a lot of tools, like a lot. Viktor has like this series where he takes the entire tool chain of Kubernetes, and then he makes those crazy battles of all the different, like OPA versus Kyverno versus the tree versus like Crossplane versus all the other ones. So what is interesting for me to hear is I want to hear your thoughts about the future going into Kubernetes 1.26. And we had a lot of talks about OPA and validations. And what is your take on it? Where is this world going?
Policy.
And don't say
from
I have no idea.
From policy
Yes,
perspective.
yes.
Okay, so where the world is going from policy perspective is that OPA and Kyverno and any other proprietary format for policies will be utterly destroyed. It will disappear completely. That happens very often. It will happen something similar to what happened with monitoring and observability tools. Once, what's the name? OTel, OpenTelemetry, became a thing. Everybody had to adapt to it, right? Or be very huge and say no, and then adapt it later. Same thing will happen with policies. 126 got Kubernetes validation policy baked in, but not installed by default because it's alpha. When it becomes beta, if I'm not mistaken, it will be in every single Kubernetes cluster. So all the tools, my prediction for that is that all the tools based on policies will have to adopt that format or be utterly shamed by me.
Yeah, so it's interesting because in the previous sessions, someone like made a vote if people like Rego or hate Rego, and turns out most people hate Rego.
Who likes Rego? Nobody ever liked Rego. You're faking it. It's like, who likes Perl? No? You know what's awesome about Perl? You can write equivalent of 100 lines of Go in one line. And you have a job security forever because nobody will ever understand that line. Same thing with Rego. I don't like Rego. I know that there are folks who love it. The problem I have with Rego is that I'm exaggerating a bit, right? I think that if you're specialized into writing policies, that's your job. Learning Rego is absolutely amazing because what you can do with Rego, you cannot do with any other format that I know, right? It's extremely powerful. However, you will be the one receiving those JIRA tickets. Because nobody else in your company will ever learn Rego. That's a promise. Or you're all superheroes, kind of. But, any other question? I forgot the question, so I'm saying any other because I don't remember anymore what you asked me. All good? Let's see whether this is still working. It will happen eventually.
Where's Darren?
Where is Darren? He's Southern States. I always forget where he lives. I know that he's next to the NASCAR racing, so Charlotte, yes. There we go. North Carolina, yes. You as well? Okay, yeah. He decided since COVID came, that he's not going to go anywhere, independently of whether COVID exists or doesn't. He's at home. Anybody else? Yes.
We are using Liquibase today to do data migration with Kubernetes. Would you recommend Hero Stream to using instead, or?
So Schema Hero against Liquibase, right? Essentially the question. Yes. So there are things, special things, things I don't know, but special things that are beyond simple tables and what's not in Postgres or whichever database you're doing that Schema Hero cannot do. It's really not very good with migrations. So kind of you want to break a table into two tables or move the data from here to there. Liquibase is so much better for that. But for anything else, Schema Hero works like a charm. Now, I personally prefer doing an exception every once in a while, but manage things declaratively, because I don't want to think about imperative way to change the schemas, and it's just too complicated. It takes too much time. And no, I prefer Schema Hero unless I have to use something else like Liquibase. Second thing that I think is very important about Schema Hero is that I really don't want to deal with 57 different APIs to get something, right? That's why I'm so fond of Kubernetes. Doesn't matter whether you use this Kubernetes, that Kubernetes. It doesn't have to be even able to run containers, but what matters is that I want to have one API to manage stuff. And if Liquibase would become Kubernetes native, and this is important, I don't care anymore at this point. I don't want to even know about the tools that can run in Kubernetes. That's not good enough. I want to have tools that extend Kubernetes API so that I can manage them by creating resources instead of a pod running in the deployment. So if Liquibase does that, it would be a better tool than Schema Hero, but it doesn't. Anybody else? I'm good at trashing products. You can ask me about any other if you want.
I would like to hear your take on how generative AI will impact DevOps or Kubernetes.
Generative AI. I think that things like what is happening right now with AI, ChatGPT, actually I prefer Copilot. I think it's more user-friendly. I mean, I don't want to develop in browser, just silly. Anyways, I think it's nothing going to change special, because those types of changes we've been seeing at least for 30 years or more, how long I am in industry, right? What is happening all the time is that the bottom layer of what we're doing becomes commoditized, becomes easy. Like we were drag and dropping with Dreamweaver, and then 30 years later we get a term low code, no code. No, I can low code, no code with Dreamweaver and then with Flash and stuff like that, right? Virtualization also kind of eliminated certain type of work. Cloud eliminated other type of work. And now ChatGPT and AI and what's not is eliminating again the need for people to spend hours, those of you working in Java, to spend hours writing getter setters, right? Brings no value, right? But that is happening all the time. I don't think that anything changes. It's just kind of, there is a new tool that makes you at this level obsolete, and then you need to go to the higher level. When code is concerned, I don't think that generative AI in the near future will replace writing good, optimized code that you should be using in production, but can eliminate easily 80% of what you're doing, which is great because it helps you focus on 20% that makes sense. Yeah, oh, now everybody, huh? No. People from Turkey, no. You.
Are there any drawbacks of Crossplane over Terraform?
The biggest drawback for Crossplane is that it is much younger project than Terraform, right? It's the same drawback that Terraform has compared to Ansible, and that Ansible has compared to Chef and Puppet, right? And that Chef and Puppet has compared to CF Engine, which probably nobody ever heard of here, right? So it's a newer project, that's the major drawback, right? There is more providers, more coverage, more everything in Terraform. Now, in my head, the question is really whether you're going to jump into using Kubernetes to manage stuff now or later. It's coming, that's guaranteed, right? Kubernetes way to manage infrastructure services and everything else is coming. And that's very easy to know why it's coming and why it's almost inevitable, because Google, AWS, Azure, VMware, and almost every other major player is moving in that direction, right? The question is only whether it will be Crossplane or something else. Now, my bets go on Crossplane, but what matters really is that extending Kubernetes to manage stuff, that's something that you all need to jump on, whether it's Crossplane or something else. KubeVal is great, not for infrastructure, but it's a great way to extend it. Use Knative. Whomever is not using Knative, you're really making a terrible mistake, and so on and so forth. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, more of a feature-wise question. So,
the only feature missing and will never exist is the equivalent of Terraform plan. And the reason why it will never exist is because it is impossible to do it. And it is impossible to do it because when you adopt Kubernetes, you're adopting the principle that I tell you what I want and you figure it out in your own time, right? You cannot have a plan. I'm going to ignore Crossplane, Ralph. There is no tool that I know of that will give you a Terraform plan against a deployment, right? Because deployment will create replica sets, which will create pods, which will run somewhere we do not know where, because Kubernetes will figure it out over time, right? So a bunch of processes are happening after it reaches Kube API, and plan is missing, really. That's the biggest feature, maybe.
Yay.
Yeah,
Great.
finished.
Thank you very much. Big round of applause to Viktor.